I'm joined today by my colleagues, Charlotte and Karen. They're here alongside me, so they'll be monitoring the chat throughout and also be reminding me of anything that I might have forgotten to say as well. So at the moment, everybody is muted, cameras are off, but we'll open up for a Q&A session at the end. Also, just to make you aware, the session will be recorded and will also be available for people to view afterwards. So I'm imagining I'll probably speak for the next 15-20 minutes, and then like I say, then we'll open it up to a Q&A session at the end. You can ask us any questions, like I say, during the time on the channel down the right hand side, but you can also put your hands up at the end if there's anything still outstanding there. So just over the next 15-20 minutes, I'll just introduce the programme to you, what it is, the areas of the city which are eligible for funding, how much money is available and the types of projects which can be funded, who decides how that funding is allocated, how you can get involved, next steps and timelines, and then we'll open up for a Q&A at the end. So just to start with, where can the funding be spent? And the UK government have determined that the North Locality priority neighbourhoods are the areas of the city which are eligible for funding. So that is Cummings Park, Heathryfold, Mastrick, Middlefield and Northfield. Aberdeen is a phase 2 area. So the phase 1 areas, they tend to be towns which had a wider geography. So you might have heard that Peterhead was selected as an area, Elgin had been selected, Arbroath had been selected, and they're all part of the phase 1 areas, which had populations of up to 50,000 people. For round 2, which is what we're in, the UK government have decided to take a hyper-local approach, and so they're going for areas which have approximately 15,000 people. So the area here, which they've selected in Aberdeen, has about a population of about 17,000 people. The UK government, they determined which area would be eligible based on a combination of SIMD index and also the Scottish Community Needs Index as well. So how much funding is available? So up to £20 million over 10 years is available. I've put that in sort of speech marks just because there's a couple of things to say, a couple of caveats around that. If you have a look at the table there, it's actually just under £20 million which is available. It's 19.6 million. And if you have a look over 10 years, and if you're counting along, you'll actually see that it's over an 11-year programme. This year is 25-26, so we've just received our first payment today, and that's to see us till the end of this financial year. But one of the great things about this funding programme is that any funds that aren't spent by the end of this financial year can be rolled over into the next year. And I know some of you who've applied previously for UK Share Prosperity Fund or the Place-Based Investment Programme as well. You might be used to saying that everything has to be delivered and spent by the 31st of March. But the great thing about this programme here is that anything that's not spent by the end of the financial year can be rolled over into the next one. If you have a look there at the breakdown, you will see that the majority of the funds which are available to support capital projects. So about 2/3 of the funding is available for capital projects. And by capital projects, what we mean is those where there's a real investment, like a tangible investment, such as something in the ground, whether that's a building, an asset, or something else. However, there is also scope there to explore revenue funding to either start to look at business cases for some of these capital projects, but also maybe to build a bit of capacity there within the community as well, to try and get like some different skills there within the area. One of the caveats about this is we do say that it's up to 10 years, but funding is only confirmed until the next spending review, which is when the next general election will be. Thereafter, depending on the outcomes of that general election, the next government may then decide to pause the programme or stop it. So although the current government have said it's up to 10 years, just to be aware that actually after the next general election, there might not be any funding available for the remaining years within this programme. And so with that in mind, what the UK government have asked us to do is over that 10-year cycle, at different points, we'll create neighbourhood plans. We'll create a neighbourhood plan in the first year, which is 26-27, and that's for a 4-year period. Thereafter, we'll create a 3-year plan. And then 3 years after that, we'll create a final 3-year plan. That's just so that we ourselves can evaluate and assess what the community needs are in the area and how we might want to spend the money. So what can be funded? I think we're quite lucky here in Aberdeen. Community Plan in Aberdeen have been busy over the past year, sort of engaging with community groups, with people in the communities as well to find out what there is existing there and also the types of things they might want to see going forward. So we know from over the past year that from going out to speaking to groups that there's great assets there in the community. You know, there's the physical spaces, you've got Middlefield Hub, Cummings Park Centre, Mastrick Community Centre. You've also got real intangible benefits which people see, the safe spaces, the food banks, the people, as well as some of the organisations who are involved there, like Shmoo, Byron Football Club, Jackie Innes as well. So from this, we've sort of got that initial mapping of the great things there in the community, and we can continue to use this fund to build upon that and to make enhancements to these. But we can also use that as an opportunity to think about actually what could be better in the area and looking at some of this initial engagement activities that we're doing with people to say, actually, what else could we do here in the area? Could it be improved green space? Could we look at community safety? Could we look at transport links as well? Now, it is 20 million over 10 years, so it's unlikely that we're going to be able to fix absolutely everything. But over the next 6 to 9 months, what we'll be doing is looking at what people want to see and what they want to prioritise and how that fits in with that initial 4-year programme. And we can deliver these outcomes through a variety of different routes and models. So, for example, we might want to set up grant schemes. I appreciate that large pots of funding can maybe put some smaller community organisations off. So one of the first things we might want to do, for example, is to have a grant scheme where local community groups can apply for grants of up to, say, £10,000 to improve green space, to improve parks, to put in community allotments. Again, similar approach, we might want to look at a participatory budgeting model where we let the community decide. You know, we might commission something to say, you know, we want to improve community safety. What types of things can we put forward from that? Or it is also a lot of money. So we might want to look at a procured or commissioned service to really make a lot of capital investment in one key asset within one of the areas as well, or one or two of those assets. Our role within the council is to make sure that all of this is done in line with public finance and legislation, to make sure that everything's fair, transparent, and all value to public pound as well. So with that, who decides on how this funding is spent? So the first person there in the bottom right of the screen is the MP. The MP is selected by the constituents to represent them to UK government. So whenever we're making proposals to the UK government, then the MP also needs to sign off to say that yes, the community have been consulted, yes, everything's been done in a fair, transparent manner. The council act as the accountable body. So any of the funds that come from UK government come to the council, and it's our role to really engage with people to make sure that everybody's represented, but also to ensure that the funding is spent in the correct manner. So as well as the funding, we've also got to think about legislation as well. If we're putting in like capital assets, environmental implications, integrated impact assessments, that type of thing. So it's our role to really do a lot of the behind the scenes, making sure that we're ticking all those boxes. And then in our new format to funding, we've got the Neighbourhood Board, which will be established over the coming months. The Neighbourhood Board is quite like the priority neighbourhood partnerships that we have through the community planning groups. What it is a group of people who will represent the community to make sure that the voices and the needs of what the community say and want we do with that funding is made. So across Scotland, those boards tend to be about 10 to 20 members. And like I say, go on to the next slide about sort of the representation which we're looking for within that neighbourhood board. But I do just want to say something as well, which we'll also be looking at within the funding from the UK government. And part of that funding, we also have to look at building the capacity of the neighbourhood board and looking at whether they themselves want to become a registered body within sort of 2 to 3 years. So for example, some of the phase 1 neighbourhood boards are starting to explore whether they might want to become community interest groups or they might want to become charitable bodies themselves. Other neighbourhood boards are sort of saying, actually, we're quite happy just making the strategic direction, the strategic decisions of how this goes. But what the neighbourhood board might look like within the next 3 to 4 years is also something that we'll be exploring over these initial years of the Pride in Place programme. So the neighbourhood board, like I say, the majority of boards across Scotland tend to be between 10 and 20 members. We have to have a minimum of 8 members. And there are some political representatives that we have within that. So, for example, the MP will be a part of the neighbourhood board, the MSP, and at least one elected member from Aberdeen City Council as well. At least 51% of the board have to be community representatives, which means people who either live or work directly within one of those 5 neighbourhoods there. But we're also looking for people who represent and who work with those groups as well. So we're looking for anybody from any community organisations, sports clubs, local businesses, youth representatives, third sector partners, health partners, etc., who might want to put themselves forward and who can really represent what people in those communities and those neighbourhoods want to see within the area. So what is the neighbourhood board and the chair? So the chair, we're looking for somebody who's politically independent, somebody who's got strong community connections and has leadership experience. £20 million for capital projects is probably not going to see us very far if we have a huge wish list. And again, there might be some competing priorities there. So from the chair as well, we're really wanting somebody who can just sort of take that strategic overview and to help bring the board alongside them so we can all come to a cohesive decision on how this funding is spent. Alongside that, we're looking for people from the community, from supporting organisations to join the board as well. So those are people who have a strong community connection to the area, who represent a community voice and who can really provide that strategic stewardship for the programme. And by that, we mean that people who can really say that whilst they appreciate some people's opinions, when they're speaking to people that they know within the area, this is definitely the types of things that they want to see, or the types of things that actually is probably less important than something else. And then just a bit of practical details about the neighbourhood board and chair. So the meetings have to be held at least quarterly, but I do want to set expectations that experience from the phase 1 neighbourhood boards have said that those boards are actually meeting approximately every 4 to 6 weeks within that initial year 1 phase of delivery, whilst we look at different priorities and whilst we establish what our neighbourhood plan will be for that initial 4-year period. Some of the groups have found that actually once they get those priorities, they've then split up into like separate working groups. So for example, if you go back to that previous example I gave, we might then from the board have some of the board members representing green space, we might have some of those board members representing safer neighbourhoods, etc. And they're the types of people who then can lead on a working group, but then they'll come together within that board setting. My expectation at the moment that these meetings will be held in rotating community settings across the 5 neighbourhoods there. Probably take it in turn, but again, that's all to be determined by the neighbourhood board once they're established during the summer period. And also to say that expenses may be available as well. So again, any expenses which are claimed will be coming from that total pot of £19.6 million. So again, we want to be quite proportionate with the types of expenses which we can put out to the board. But again, I wouldn't want anybody to be prohibited from applying to become board members if, for example, transport costs or childcare costs would enable them to participate in the board. So likely when the board comes in place in the summer, sort of an expenses policy about that will be something else that we initially look at as well. But if in the meantime you are interested in becoming a board member and you do have initial queries about that, please feel free to contact myself directly and we can discuss that and look at arrangements for that. So just to let you know that as of yesterday, expressions of interest for the neighbourhood board and chair went live on our website. We have just got initial Microsoft Word documents, just asking people for some context, a bit of words about why they want to join the board or why they might think that they themselves would be a good option for chair. So with the chair, we're asking for their links to the community group, any experience they might have had with convening boards, also anything as well that they might have experience of delivering capital projects, particularly within sort of public funding realm. And then again with the board, we're not asking so many questions with that. What we're really asking with the board is their connection to the community and also why they themselves would like to be a member of the board. We also have to make sure that we've got a fair representation of different people within that. So also at the bottom of there, we're just asking people what area best represents them. Is it from a community group? Is it an individual who lives in the area or something else as well? So just before we wrap up for our Q&A session, just to talk to you about sort of the next initial steps that we've got. So the neighbourhood board and chair, that went live yesterday. The chair will be live for 4 weeks and we'll be looking to appoint a chair probably at the beginning of April. The applications, the expressions of interest for the neighbourhood board, they're live for about 6 to 7 weeks until about mid-April. And then once the chair is appointed, we'll be working alongside the chair to appoint the other board members. So ideally, we're looking for the board to be in place prior to the summer holidays so we can start to have some initial meetings before people start to break up. Over the next month or so, what we're also going to be doing is starting and launching an events and engagement programme. So like I say, we've got a lot of that initial data there from what Community Plan in Aberdeen have been going out and asking people over the past year. But we want to sort of build on that now that we know that we've got the funding here for the area. So thinking about any groups we might not have engaged with during that process, but also now that people know that actually there's a pot of funding there to enable some of this activity, does that help prioritise certain projects or certain types of activity as well? So we'll soon be ring fencing some funds and making funds available for community organisations to host events over that spring, summer months. And as part of that, we'll be doing some engagement activities during those events to really get a sense of community voice. Once we've done that engagement over the summer months, our intention is that the board will all come together to develop a Pride in Place plan. With that, the Pride in Place plans, they're quite high level. The UK government want to know that the community is being engaged with. So within that, we'll have to say the types of activities which we've undertaken to engage with people to make sure we've got a representative voice. We will also have to likely prioritise which projects and say that although this is our priorities over the next 10 years, over the next 3 to 4 years, we'll probably prioritise these areas and explore these avenues for delivering this activity. It's not a set plan to say that yes, we will definitely deliver X, Y, and Z within the 4 years. Is more of a we've reviewed it with the community. This is what we believe the community priorities are, and this is how we're going to deliver that over the next 4 years. That has to be sent to the UK government by the end of November. And then about this time next year, the UK government will either approve that plan or they might come back and ask us some other questions with regards to it. But hopefully they'll have approved it, in which case our main programme for work commences in spring 2027. So about this time next year, we'll probably be starting some of that initial activity. And like I say, with those timelines, there's probably some quick programmes we could kick off with quite easily, you know, some initial grant programs, etc. But there might be other aspects of that, maybe some wider capital investment projects, which might take a longer lead in time. But during that period as well, sort of between winter 26 into spring 27, we can do some of the behind the scenes work on that, whether it's initial studies or whether it's starting to draft procurement exercises and documents as well. So that is a very whirlwind tour of the Pride in Place programme. It is an introduction to it. You can contact us. We do have a mailbox there, the Pride in Place programme, prideinplace@aberdeencity.gov.uk. But again, if you want to contact me directly, if you're interested in becoming a member of the neighbourhood board, you do want to ask questions about expenses or anything else about that, you can contact myself directly. I'm Ellie Patterson at aberdeencity.gov.uk. Within the past month, I've gone out and met a couple of different people, a couple of different folk within the community groups. I'm also very open to coming out and meeting with other groups who I haven't yet met with over the next few months. So again, if you've got a group you'd like me to come along and speak to, I'm more than happy to do that. We can do that in Teams calls. Also very happy to come out to you and meet you within the community itself as well. We do also have Aberdeen City Council webpage where we've got all these details on. Charlotte and Karen might have shared that in the chat just now, but if not, we'll share that as well just now, just so you can know where all of our information is going at the moment. I will caveat that as well by saying that once the neighbourhood board is established this summer, one of the initial things they might want to do is to make that clear distinction between the neighbourhood board and also the council as well. So the neighbourhood board might actually, one of the first things they might want to do is look at a branding exercise and a comms activities for the neighbourhood board. So they themselves might want to establish their own web page, their own web addresses as well, so that comms, etc., are flowing through the neighbourhood board rather than the council as well. But again, we've got all your contact details. If you're happy to, as things progress, we'll keep everybody updated on that. So that is me, like I say, a very whistle-stop tour of Pride in Place programme. I will stop sharing my screen now. We can come to some questions. Just before we do, Charlotte or Karen, was there anything you've been picking up in the Q&As in the chat just now, or anything else you think I might have missed that we might want to discuss?
I think you've covered everything quite well there. There's one question from Murray asking, what can the revenue funding be used for? Any limitations or restrictions?
No, so it's quite flexible. The revenue funding, it can be used to support that initial, before you get to capital stage works. So we could use it to look at feasibility studies. We could use that also to look at business cases. So one of the things as the council, as the accountable body, will also be ensuring public value for money. So one of the things we need to ensure is that there's a legacy to these projects, particularly the capital projects as well. So one of the things I will say is that if we're looking to build a new asset or put money into an asset, we also have to think about who's going to be running and maintaining that asset at the end of this 10-year period. So for example, some of that initial revenue funding could be used to look at business cases. Actually, how do we build that community capacity and make it like a commercial enterprise as well, which can keep itself going? But we might also want to look at different other things. Like I say, the neighbourhood board themselves might want to look at some of that revenue funding to support them and the community engagement that they have. They might also look to commission certain types of activity, again, community engagement activity, or maybe different skills programs as well. So for example, if one of the things we're thinking about is a skills hub, you might want to ring fence some capital funding for that skills hub, but alongside that, maybe also some revenue funding to pilot some initial projects as to how that could look as well. So it's really quite flexible as well. There is a huge list on the UK government website of the types of interventions which can be supported from it, which is why I think over the next few months we'll be really looking at what we want to prioritise and what the community want to prioritise from that as well, because it's a very expansive list, and like I say, particularly for capital projects, they might not go, 20 million might not go that far. Is there anything else, Karen or Charlotte, or will we just move to a live Q&A and people can put up their hands?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to raise hands? One coming from Meg. Can you support the gardens in the area? Was that right? Sorry, just came across the top of my screen. Sorry, just taking a wee second. Can you support the garden communities in areas? Yes, I mean, certainly we can support garden communities. Like I say, it'll be part of that neighbourhood board to decide on how they might want to spend that money. Again,